My son, Ben, got married last year. And during the year of hubbub and planning for that wedding, I got to thinking about rites of passage. And I realized that the first big one that we have in our culture is getting our driver's licenses. I was a teenager when I got my license. It came in the mail. I ripped open that envelope, took that license out and paraded it around the house, underneath the nose of my mother and my father. I said, look at this. It means that I can drive the car alone now without somebody in the passenger seat. It means I can exercise my independence. The first thing I did to exercise my independence was to go to my mother and say, you want me to do some grocery shopping for you? Of course, I'd need to borrow your car. And she actually gave me her keys. So I took them out to her car and I started backing that car out of the driveway and clunk, right over the curb. Not such a good start, but not such a bad one either. I swung out onto that street, headed out for the next street, turned the corner, picked up a little speed. Turned the next corner, the last street before the big thoroughfare outside of our neighborhood, and that was when I heard whoop, whoop. And I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. A police car? Why? What could I possibly have done wrong? But I knew what I was supposed to do. I pulled over to the side and stopped. The police car pulled over and stopped behind me. I got out of my mother's car. That was the appropriate gesture then, not the threatening one it is today. The policeman got out of his car and said, get in the back of my car. I couldn't have to get in the back of a police car. I was just a kid, a teenager. But I knew I had to, so I got in the back of his car. He got in the front, and he said, so how fast do you think you were going? 25? 35 in a 25 zone. And he started writing me up my very first speeding ticket. I crumpled in the back seat thinking, oh, this is terrible. I am in so much trouble. I hope nobody comes by and sees my humiliation. No sooner had I had that thought than a car turned off that main thoroughfare onto that street, and I recognized it. It belonged to my father. Oh, I thought I was in trouble before. This is terrible. No, this is good. He would stop and he would save me from the terrible, awful policeman. I watched my father see my mother's car. I watched him see the police car. I watched him see me in the back of the police car. And I watched him drive right on by, turn the corner and disappear. How could he do that? No, I knew. He was going to go around the block. And then he would come back the way he'd come the first time, and then he would save me from the terrible, awful policeman. I gave him plenty of time. He never came back. And when I went home, I found him sitting on his easy chair, and I waved that ticket in front of him. How could you do that? How could you leave me there to that policeman all by myself? And he said, I was just letting you exercise your independence. Daedalus was the most exquisite designer, architect, builder ever. And so when King Minos needed to have a labyrinth built that would contain the monster, the Minotaur, he asked Daedalus to do it. And when it was done, it was perfect. And King Minos was pleased for a time. But as often happens in mythology with kings, he soon decided that Daedalus had betrayed him. And so he had Daedalus and Daedalus' son Icarus captured and imprisoned in that very labyrinth. In time, Daedalus managed to get himself and his son out of that labyrinth, but he knew they were not out of trouble because they were on the island of Crete, and the entire island was filled with soldiers belonging to the king. And they couldn't escape by sea because there were ships belonging to the king surrounding the island. And they couldn't escape by air because man doesn't fly. Or could he? And so Daedalus began to watch the birds, watch how their wings were formed, watch how they used them to fly. And then he began to collect feathers, all kinds and shapes of feathers. He made a lightweight frame, and he started to put those feathers in their proper order, small ones, middle-sized ones, the long flight feathers on the end. And the smallest of the feathers he glued together with melted beeswax. And the biggest ones, he glued some, but he also used fine filament of thread and sewed them together. When the wings were done, he put on the pair, and he worked with them until he understood how to make them fly. And then he began a second set of wings. And his son Icarus hovered around him, touching, asking questions. He could not wait to have his own set of wings. When they were done, Daedalus put them on Icarus, and he said, "Son, listen to me. We are going to fly up over this island of Crete, over the Aegean Sea, to safety. And I will teach you how to use these wings. But you must only do what I do. You must only go where I go. Most especially, you must not go too close to the water, because we are not birds, and if we get these wings wet, more than likely they'll pull us into the water. And you must not go too close to the sun, because the heat of the sun will melt the beeswax, and then the feathers will not hold." And so the two of them, Daedalus and Icarus, began to fly. And at first it was difficult for Icarus, but he caught on quickly. And he realized that he could circle around, he could swoop, he could soar. He was sure not to go too close to the water. He tried not to go too high, but as he flew and flew, he realized that the higher he went, the more powerful he felt, and it was wonderful. And he forgot. And he went too high, and beeswax began to melt, and the first of the feathers dropped off, and then more feathers, until they were only the longest ones held by the filaments of thread, and they ripped away. And Icarus was held up only with his own arms, and they could not help him stay up. He began to plummet toward the sea, and he screamed out, "Father! Father! Up ahead, Daedalus had been watching. Ever so often, he'd turn around to see his son, make sure he was fine. Now he turned around and, "Icarus? Icarus? Icarus, where are you? I can't see you. Tell me where to look for you." And he looked down and he saw this mess of feathers in the water. And he knew what had happened. So he flew down to the next island and waited until his son's body washed up on shore. And he buried it on that island. And ever since then, that island is called Icaria. And the part of the Aegean Sea around Icaria is still called the Icarian Sea, so that we will remember that story. My son Ben, the same one that just got married this past year, got his license when he was a teenager. Only his did not come in the mail. He had to go to court to get his. And he had to bring a parent or a guardian. I liked that. We went to the courthouse, sat down in the courtroom. I looked around, and there were all these young people looking anxious and ashen. Finally, the judge came in. We all stood up, and when we were told, we sat back down again. And the judge began to tell us stories. He told us the story of his own daughter, who had gotten her license and then taken the family car out and stayed out after curfew. And what happened to her? Just how very long she had confinement consequences. And then he told us about teenagers who drank and drove, and about teenagers who ignored stop signs and stoplights. And he went on, and I liked that judge. Because I could see that he understood that we'd remember those stories of his long after we'd remember any kind of lecture he could have given us. And when he was done, he picked up the stack of licenses and he said, I am not going to give these licenses to any of you young people here today. How is that possible? That's why everybody was there. I am going to give these licenses to you parents and guardians. And if you adults find that your teenager is staying out after curfew with the family car, drinking and driving, doing drugs, in any other way, not behaving according to the rules of your household or of this society, I give you permission, no, I demand that you take the licenses away. And then we were all lined up, and the parents and guardians took the licenses, and I paraded Ben's outside that courtroom. Outside the courthouse, into the parking lot. He held himself together really well. Until we were almost to the car. Then he said, Mom, please, can you give me my license? Oh, I thought the judge gave it to me. Mom, he didn't mean for you to keep it forever. No, I guess not. I guess you did earn it. I looked at that child of mine who was becoming a young man, and I knew it was time for him to exercise his independence. Do you want to drive home? Oh, yes. He took that license, got in the driver's seat, I got in the passenger seat, and he started out of the driveway, and I thought, oh, I hope he doesn't drive over the curb the first time the way I did. I hope he doesn't get his speeding ticket the first time out on his own the way I did. We got home later that afternoon. He said, Mom, you want me to go do some errands for you? Of course, I'd need to use your car. I did not want to give him my keys. But I did. And as he drove away from the house, I thought, oh, I hope that he has truly heard all the stories he has been told. I hope that he is wise as he learns to spread those wings. Thank you.